What do I want? It's a question that everyone eventually has to ask themselves. The key motivator for every action taken. The cause behind every effect. So, what do I want? I want to go to a sporting event in every major venue. I want to grow within my relationships with my friends and my family. I want the freedom to create without the fear of failure. I want to dream without being hindered by reality. I want to chase new passions, new experiences, and new goals. I want OldMilk to branch out of the box and try new things. I'm accomplishing some of these goals right now, and I know what I need to do to achieve the rest of them. However, the one thing you should take away from this commercial is, I want you to buy OldMilk merch.
His fan base, I mean, when I was a part of it, like, it was kind of like a little bit of like a nerdy thing in a way. Not nerd. That's not the right word, but you know what I mean. Where it's like it wasn't like this. Like, I didn't think of Kanye as like a leader of like the youngest generation. It was like this one generation really loves him and has like passed him down to our generation in a way that was like, all right, so you have like two whole generations of fans that like really, really resonate with like multiple eras of music from this person. But now it's like the youngest fans love him, like in a way that's crazy. And it really started with like, it sounds weird to say this, but it really started with like the Yeezy 350s. Like those shoes, once people started wearing them and then like the Yeezy season stuff became more popular, his fan base is like a strange section of
Yeah,
people.
I think what we're really seeing is obviously our generation grew up with the internet, and like maybe like a few 3-4 years after us grew up with the internet as well. But I feel like we can all remember a time when we didn't care. Like we had our toys, we had our Hot Wheels, or I don't know, people had Barbie dolls or whatever. Like whatever actual tangible form of entertainment that wasn't a screen. I feel like we can all remember that. And now we're dealing with a generation that doesn't exist at all. So in a way, we're really seeing the first results of this internet experiment. And it's kind of weird to see, because even in the, like, I put the Kanye things in the same category as the Elon Musk things, where it's like you
Yeah.
have again like these extremely young kids who haven't even really lived life yet, have no way to really relate to anything that these people are saying, and they're just regarding Elon Musk and Kanye as gods. And it's just so
Yeah.
weird to see this God complex kind of come into play now. I mean, it's also interesting because whatever you want to say, like Elon Musk, you can say whatever about him. It's kind of in doubt where that talent really lies. Kanye has the talent. So it's also an extra layer of, it's not like someone like, I don't know. I'm just pulling this out of thin air. Someone like Iggy Azalea, who all of a suddenly has fans and we have no idea why. It's like everybody can agree on the fact that Kanye is super talented as an artist. And I think because of that, it becomes harder to condemn this type of thing, because you can't have a full 1000%, no matter what he does, I hate it attitude towards it, the same way that you can with the Elon Musk, or the same way you can with even Andrew Tate, or all these content creators coming up now that have like this insane niche, dedicated, almost like Nicki Minaj, Barb like fandom. Like even Nicki Minaj doesn't get to that level, and we know, like everybody knows that the Barbs are crazy as fuck. So it's just so interesting to see what happens when an artist or anybody, a public figure, is being worshipped, and there's more credibility than 99% of all the other similar situations in that.
Yeah, it's it's just weird to me because it feels like the young kids love Kanye, but they weren't there for like the the Kanye that everyone fell in love with. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
they weren't they weren't there. I mean, even you and I are like too young to have gotten the first two albums like that. Like 2004 and 2005, I was in like that's first and second grade.
Yeah.
And then like I remember Graduation coming out. I remember Stronger. Like you know what I mean? And then like Heartless was obviously a huge song. So I remember like the singles, but still like 2008, I'm 10 years old. It's not like
Watching Sports Center.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So I mean the first album I ever had was not like the first album I ever had. The first album I like had to kind of work for was like I had to give like a blank disc to like one of my friends in middle school who could burn Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy for me. You know what I mean? And like he wrote like the name in Sharpie and like had I think it was like Twisted Dark. He had it backwards. So it's like, you know
I
what, like
Twisted Dark Fantasy
yeah,
by
and then
West Kanye.
yeah, and then I saw him on the Yeezus tour. And then you know what I mean? And it was like everything it made sense for like that's what I mean. It's like the generation before us was there for like the rise. And then they handed like this artist off and then he carried the torch for our generation for a really long time. But it's just strange to me that like this generation that seems to be his most like avid fan base right now is like came in for like Kids See Ghosts and Yay. Like
Yeah.
that's their reference point for him, and that's like what they're like riding on. That's crazy to me because
Yeah.
it's like even
It's
Pablo came out when we were still in high school, so it's
mhm.
like we were still young. You know what I mean? Like we were in college when those came out, and even then
Those
I
kids
was
are
like,
still watching Noggin and
right, yeah,
Blue's
and
Clues
like
and shit.
so it just it doesn't make sense to me at all. But it is what it is. I think that this weekend stuff with him like talking crazy will this feels like a little more like final than some other things. Not final, but it's kind of like you know what you said about you can't 100% hate it because there's still like obviously the talent is undeniable and always has been. It's easier to become indifferent.
Yeah.
It's easier to become like yo, I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't like, and not that I don't care about what he's doing. It's horrible, like the stuff he's saying, but it's more like if new music comes out, if clothes, whatever, like where I used to be like really like watching it and in anticipating it, it's like now I'm just like, okay, like I just don't care.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's power in not caring. I think that the probably the best thing to do is to not care because I forgot who said it, but some famous person, I think it might have been, I think it was academics who said whether you hate me or you love me, if you click on this video, you're still supporting me. Like in whatever way, it's still support. And I think that I agree with that. I think that it's true across the board. That's why as much as I don't like Stephen A. Smith's opinions from time to time, when I click on it, it's still me technically supporting him.
That's
He be
private.
wilding. He be nah, but he like, but I think within that, it's whatever Kanye says, you have the fan base that's going to be like, yeah, it's Kanye. He's a guy. Whatever he says is true, whatever. And then you're going to have the other side that has that strong rebuke towards him. And I think that perhaps, like, at a certain point, it's just like, why give that person what they're craving, the engagement that they're craving from just saying things like that? Because for all we know, he could just be saying this stuff and he's just saying it just to say he believes none of this stuff at all. But it's just such good marketing for him and it keeps him in the news that he continues to do it over and over again. So, like within that, we don't even know what the true intentions of all this shit is. And I feel like for me, at least people in the media, the one thing that you should know before you start talking about something or before you decide something's a huge story is you should know or have a good idea of what the facts are behind it, whether it be intention, what went on, et cetera, et cetera. We obviously have what went on, and I guess that's in the rush to be first. That's the main thing that matters. But still, intention or trying to peel the curtain back and figure out what's going on still matters and should still be, I think it should be more reinforced than ever. And I guess if you don't know how to peel back the curtain or figure out intention, watch the Cat podcast.
Yeah, it's interesting in that way too, because every time someone does, you know, like it's always like the intention, the intention, the intention, but like increasingly it's become increasingly common lately and more recently for no matter what explanation gets cooked up by whoever, either Ye or his fans are like, still, no matter what anyone says, they're like, no, you don't get it though. You don't get it. Like, you know what I mean? So at some point it is kind of like, okay, well, if we don't get anything that's being said, if people, if they don't get it, unless you're like in that mentality or that mindset, if at some point it's like, okay, then all we have is what's there at face value. Because if no one ever gets it, and if you claim that no one ever gets it for after 20 years of people trying to get it, it's like it's that's where the indifference comes in. It's like the attention is the ultimate goal, and it always has been the ultimate goal. And where it feels like all the other pieces that used to make that part worth it, or that part felt like part of the art piece, it doesn't, to me at least, it doesn't feel like that anymore.
Yeah.
Like there is no more, like the rant about like you ain't got the answer, Sway, that was directly related to his ability to create. And
Turned out Sway
recently,
had the answers, by the way.
I know, recently it feels a lot more like ideological
Yeah.
and a lot more ideas driven, and like this is how you should think and not how you should create, or you should, it's like in it definitely has a more sinister feeling now than it ever has. So
Yeah.
that's where I think the indifference can be really powerful, because I feel like the more attention, it used to be that the attention could swing one way and be like, oh, all this other stuff was crazy, but here's like a good product, and everyone's like, oh, okay, cool, like here's another chance. And now it's like people aren't giving that extra chance, and it's getting more and more sinister every time. So I think that's where the indifference needs to come in for more people, where it's just like it won't, because it's guaranteed clicks. But at some point it's like the attention is the end goal. So
At
that's
what
kind of just how
point
it is.
does the internet, because all of this is really for the internet, at what point does the internet say at what point does the world of the internet interact with the real life to understand the real life damage that's coming from this?
Yeah.
And
It's just wild, but
we have a
hey,
podcast to do.
we have an album to talk about.
We do. We have, this is episode 323 of the Cat Podcast. That is Taylor McLeod. I am Nate Sperlin. Thank you for watching on YouTube and listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, Stitcher, Amazon Music, and more. Do us a favor, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Old Milk Media. And check out the Old Milk Spins playlist on Spotify and YouTube. That being said, we are here to talk about the Migos -1, Quavo and Takeoff, Unk and Few, only built for Infinity Links. 18 tracks long, 59 minutes long, featuring Mustard, NBA Youngboy, Young Thug, Gunna, Summer Walker, Birdman, and Gucci Mane. Taylor, what did you think about Only Built for Infinity Links?
I love the packaging.
Mm.
I love how it was put across. I love the title, like, paying homage for Only Built for Cuban Links. I like the cover, obviously feels very, very outcasty, which is perfect because they're from Atlanta. And I love it when artists nowadays pay homage to where they're from, or the artists from where they're from, because it's like that doesn't seem to happen nearly as much as it used to.
They all want to be from Atlanta, but they are actually from Atlanta.
Right.
The main issue here.
I think my my biggest takeaway from listening to it, over the weekend is that I like it when there's more space for in like the people to work. And I think that having to put all three of them, Quavo, Takeoff, and Offset, on each song except for except for biggest one. Um, Sometimes you just had points where it was like a perfect example to me is Made Men off Culture 2. Takeoff kills the first two-thirds of that song. And
Mhm.
Quavo and Offset are great on it as well, but they split the third verse. And I love that because sometimes it feels like it was like, all right, this song has to be a little bit longer because we need to get, another Migo in. And I like on this project that you have the space for just two of them to work. And even in songs where like I might wish it was just one of their songs, because there's some songs where I'm like, I don't need I don't need Quavo on this, or I don't need Takeoff on this. But with just two of them, there's a lot more opportunity for them to like really, really show what they're capable of working together, but also individually. Um, Especially in the songs that are more split in half.
Yeah. I I agree with your thought process, but I don't agree with your conclusion. I think that while there is more space for both of them to work, it kind of shows you. I came away from this project feeling like Offset is the glue, and um this is a popsicle stick pyramid that does not have glue anymore, and it just fell apart. Is how I feel about it. Um, the first thing I want to say is, and this may be a critique that will be responded to by saying, well, it's the Migos or it's Quavo and Takeoff. That's not really their thing. I kind of wanted more vulnerability, specifically from Quavo on this album. There are numerous times where he references Offset or Saweetie without really saying their names. And my thing is, if you don't want to talk about it, then don't talk about it. But if you're going to continuously put in these subliminal messages directed towards or directed about Saweetie and Offset and what may or may not have happened, nothing has been confirmed, then go more in depth about it. Because it kind of, the artistry within going in depth about that, the same way that people love Summer Walker because she goes through this relationship, or even Taylor Swift, like she goes through a relationship and then she'll tell you everything that she's feeling. Or the same reason why people like ESTG or liked King Von or Benny the Butcher, when they put you in that car when they're doing those things that they're doing, the same way that happens. Like the picture, it just isn't, it comes across as shallow. Um, like it just is super shallow to me, and I don't really, that's not really something I really gravitate to, especially when um for the majority of their career they have been driven on making hits and making anthems, and the magic isn't there anymore. I don't think there's one song that I come from off of this that's like, this is on the same level of T-shirt, or this is on the same level of Handsome and Wealthy. There isn't really, even Made Men, BBO on Culture 2, with 21 Savage on that song. There isn't really anything on the same level as that. I also think the fact that we have gotten individual albums from Quavo and Takeoff, and understanding Takeoff's ability in particular. And personally, I wasn't really a fan of the Quavo um individual album. I was a real huge fan of the Takeoff album. So understanding that as well, and understanding that I was really going into this with, um, if you will, being a fan of one and a half of these artists, me being a fan of Takeoff and me halfly being a fan of Quavo. Um, it kind of it kind of left me underwhelmed in that way. I just needed more. I either needed more actual hits, or I needed more vulnerability, in the same way that we see artists like Rick Ross, for example, who at the beginning he was more of a hit maker. He always had the talent, but towards the end in his most recent projects, we've seen that vulnerability start to develop more. Just as artists age in general, you kind of see that vulnerability start to happen as albums continue and continue. We talked about how Meg Thee Stallion, we saw impressive amount of vulnerability that we hadn't seen from her before in her last project. And I just wish that that would have continued. The concept of the increase in vulnerability would have continued throughout this. And it kind of, it not kind of, it did fall short in that way.
I agree. And I think in terms of my, point about the space is it's literally just like a like song composition thing. You know what I mean? It's like not even like a how they work with each other because like like we were just talking about being the age we are, we got to experience the Migos at a really interesting time where they were like really like ascending super crazy when we were like leaving high school. And then that first year of college was like probably probably the last real genuine wave of like superstardom or like a fandom that's like feels so real in like in real life and not just on the internet, where it was like, no, you're hearing this everywhere. Like, you know what I mean? And so in that way, this kind of music worked then because it was like that's what so much of pop culture at the time wanted from the Migos because that's what they were best at. And I feel like the creativity was at a different level then, and it's almost a little formulaic now. It's a little paint by numbers. And while it still sounds good, I think both Quavo and Takeoff are talented. I think I'm glad you said what you did about Takeoff, and I think it's becoming a almost like across the board take that Takeoff has always been probably the best rapper of the three.
Yeah.
I think they have different styles, and so right following that era where they were just hugely popular, and it was like Culture came out when we were freshmen in college, and it was just the perfect album for that time. And then it was 2 years straight, Quavo was on every single song.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was hard for a lot of people because it was like this, like, almost inundation of this one artist, but in this very same way every single time. It's like we're gonna get the hook from Quavo on pop songs, on hip hop songs, on crossover songs, and, like, to get that, and then there was an individual album, and it was just like, "All right, this is" it's like a lot of Quavo. Is fine, and I know people love that, and he is like the face of the Migos, where Offset and Takeoff have always been better rappers. He is the face of the Migos, so like, in that role can't be downplayed. It really can't. Like, the groups need that. But now it's just two of them, and a lot of these songs, like you said, like it's like an attempt at an old anthem, but that formula doesn't work anymore. And so after a couple listens, you know what to expect, so it sounds better, and you're like, okay, like the songs are still good. I think they're still good, but like it feels like an entire album of filler in a way,
Yeah.
without anthems that are supposed to like take an album like this and put it on the top because it's like these 4 or 5 songs, the ones, and everything else is like leading you there, and it makes everything else worth it. It's just not like that on this track, and I really agree with you in terms of vulnerability where we've heard so many of these records from them about similar things and similar processes, and then you just don't have the vulnerability on this, and it's like the same thing, and they're obviously older and they're at a different place and stuff has happened that I want to hear about, and you just don't. It's like these allusions to things, but it's never like right to it.
Yeah. It's I don't come out of this album really wanting, like, I want to see what happens with a Takeoff solo career more than I want to see what happens with this duo. Like, either bring all three of them back, or, like, I mean, you guys can also just always be on each other's songs, stuff like that, and make collab albums when you want to. But I really, we're gonna see what an Offset solo career looks like. I'm just interested because I think the way I always looked at it was, I don't think anyone disagrees that Quavo was the face. I also don't think anyone really disagrees that Takeoff was the best rapper. But I think that Offset was he was the glue. He was the most well-rounded out of the three, which is why I'm
For sure.
super curious to see what happens with an Offset solo. Well, we saw that before with I believe it's called Father of Four, that came out in 2018, I want to say 2018 or 2019. But I want to see what happens when Offset is able to. I want to see a solo. Well, we're gonna see it, but a solo Offset career is basically what I'm trying to get at. Um, and also it doesn't appear, at least from the interviews and from what we've heard so far, it doesn't appear that the split was about QC or wasn't about creative differences. It seems like it was something more personal to them, which again we can speculate, but this isn't the podcast for it. So I'm just interested to see, I guess. But I think that they could have. This was just underwhelming to me, even with the features. Like there was like the young boy feature didn't really do it for me. The Birdman and Gucci, like the only feature that really did it for me was the Summer Walker and the Young Thug feature. That did it for me as well. But aside from that, like I feel like the placements could have been better. Also, the mixing on the first three tracks was also kind of weird. The first two tracks, Quavo was louder than Takeoff, and then on the third track, the beat is louder than both of them. It feels rushed. It doesn't feel like there was much thought process put into it, much intention put into it. So yeah, those are my final thoughts.
Yeah, I agree. And it's hard because we talk about intentionality all the time. And in a way, I almost feel the opposite about the intentionality. It feels like it was intentional, and that might be the problem. That it's like, all right, we can keep reusing this formula to make these hits over and over and over again. Um, and it's just not the same. And they came up in an era where it's the right at the end of the blog era, shifting into streaming, and they dominated that switch. Like they were probably, along with Drake, who had to deal with Apple at the time, so it was like kind of unfair in a way,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like, yeah, of course, like he released, if you're reading this, as an Apple exclusive mixtape to like kick off streaming, it felt like. But the Migos kind of dominated that, and a lot has changed since then. And based on like what you and I have talked about pretty much every episode, and I think the most important piece to all this that connects everything is the cap note that you did on Bad Habit,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like what makes a hit song nowadays. And it's kind of like who knows. In a way, it's like if the 14-year-olds on TikTok love it and find a way to like flip it into a couple, 30-second video or 10-second video or whatever it is. If they can do that, and then the cool college kids are like, yeah, we can do the same thing. Like, you know what I mean? It feels
That
like
makes
that's how
sense.
it
We could
goes.
do
It's like
that.
the young people. Right, and I guess that's probably how things have always flowed, and
Mm-hmm.
we're just getting older. Obviously, we're not ancient or anything, but
No.
it's like we're getting older, so now it feels a little different. Where it's like we aren't in on the bottom floor of something, so it's like Bad Habits, great. I loved it when it came out on the thing, and I was just like, oh, this is an amazing song. But I didn't think a Steve Lacy song, like social media was the driver for that. It
Yeah.
wasn't like a so I think that the like Unk and Few, Quavo and Takeoff are just in the middle of trying to figure out that switch. And this album kind of feels like a, all right, we ran the same offense we've been running for the last 7 years because it's worked a lot. And like maybe someone got hurt. I mean, you can kind of equate it to that, and then it's like, all right, whatever, we can just keep running the same thing. And it's like,
You
nah,
can't.
even if Offset was there, you couldn't keep just doing the same
No.
thing. Like,
Yeah.
and it
Culture 3 seemed
like
like an
the
end.
reason, right? And the reason Bad and Bougie was so great is because you had like a newcomer in Uzi who really like, it was like these
Yeah,
guys
yeah,
like, and
yeah,
then
yeah, yeah.
right, and the whole thing was great, and it had these quotables. And I mean, they have a song called Bars into Captions, which kind of like flips So Fresh and So Clean, which is cool, especially with the album cover. But it's just like, I think underwhelming is just the perfect word for it. Like, it's
Yeah.
good. It's sonically like they've made enough music and enough good music to like they're not gonna put out an unlistenable product. Like like they're gonna make something you can listen to, but it doesn't have the same impact that it used to. And it kind of feels like relying on something that's outdated.
Yeah, for sure. That's the perfect way to describe it. Stale, dated, as you said before, I think is the perfect way to describe it. But that being said, what are your favorite tracks?
I like 230 and I like Nothing Changed.
Yeah, I got Look at This, Hell Yeah, and Tools. Yeah, those are the three. All right. Thank you for watching the Cat Podcast. This has been episode 323. Let us know your thoughts on Only Built for Infinity links in the comments below. Do us a favor, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Check us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at OldMilk Media. And check out the OldMilk Spins Plays on Spotify and YouTube. We will be back next week because Lil Baby's dropping next week. So that's going to be exciting. And yeah, we'll see you next week. We're out. Thanks for watching.